G'day world, it is the Weekend Waves. I'm your host Spinksy and we have a very special guest with us today. He's had a career spanning more than 50 years. He's worked with world champions, Olympians, elite surfers, musicians and coaches, from learning training methods from a British Olympian cyclist back in the 1970s and including training athletes like our very own Australia's Lane Beachley and working alongside some of surfing's biggest names. Clive has witnessed and helped shape the evolution of performance training. And today we're talking about surfing, coaching, innovation and lessons learned from a lifetime in sport. My guest is Clive Rodell. G'day mate, how are you?
Thank you.
Yeah?
Good to see you, mate.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today and putting the time aside.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I love your podcast for a start. I do. And it's like I wouldn't have said yes unless you did a great job.
I hope you're not just saying that so you could get on.
No, not at all. No.
Very good.
Definitely. If you know me well enough by now, I don't just say things to get anywhere.
Yeah, we do. The early years, a different way of thinking back in the day. Clive, take us back way to 1973.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I started surfing when I was 9 in Cornwall, okay? And as far as the world stage was concerned, it wasn't, the foremost nation. But I started surfing and I was very lucky. I had a Hawaiian guy and an Australian guy, Mick Jackman and the bronze giant, Jack Lydgate, actually give me lessons to surf when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, etc. They helped me immensely.
Right.
And they were both excellent surfers.
So how did you meet British Pursuit cycling champion?
So Derek Hunt was, he was a British Pursuit champion. That's in the velodrome. And his parents lived in my hometown. And he was an amazing cyclist. And he didn't like the way the British hierarchy worked, so he ended up leaving Britain and went to the continent to cycle on the continent as what's called a domestique, which actually probably the hardest working guys in the cycling team.
And he was in weight training or something?
Well, he rang me up and we'd been friends because we'd met and just sort of clicked. And he rang me up and said, "Oh, Clive, can you get access to any weights?" And I went, "I don't know." And he goes, "Well, can you try and find some?" And I said, "Well, sure." And at that time, nobody did much, nobody did anything in surfing and people were really trained to look like Arnold or didn't train, And so I managed to get some access to a local athletic club which had a male change and a female change and a little shed in the middle. And we dragged out these literally rusty small bore bar plates. And what he exposed me to was, he said, all the continental teams, now this is 1973, all the continental cycling teams were weight training. And he said he couldn't believe how much difference it had made to him. And so I just went, okay, so I lapped it up. I was very hungry. I mean, my technique wouldn't have been that good back then, but it started me on that journey and I started feeling differences. So I actually joined that athletic club and they had an Olympic lifting coach there. And so he taught me all the major techniques and I just continued to train.
All right.
And the differences between not doing it and doing it were huge.
Looking back, way back then, the lessons from those early training days, would they still apply today in its sense, or have they evolved?
The lifting techniques from the Olympic coach, definitely. The way that I approached it initially, kind of makes me grin a little bit because I was flying blind. But I started to understand my body more and I started to pick things that worked and trial and error. And then as I started learning more and more about it, and I was always hungry for knowledge, so I just asked and asked and asked. And when I came to Australia, I expanded it even more. So
yeah, well, getting into from Cornwall to Australia's surfing revolution back in that time. What prompted the move actually from Cornwall to Australia?
Okay, well, this is kind of an interesting one. I had a lot of issues health-wise. With my body, basically. I was in quite a lot of pain all the time. And they diagnosed me with an arthritic condition and said that within 10 years, I was 25 at this point, within 10 years, I would be a cripple. Wow. And they said, and I said, well, what can I do? And they said, well, go to a warm climate like Saudi Arabia. And I went, yeah, probably not. And what I had done is I'd competed, I represented the country, Britain, England, as a manager, as a competitor, etc., etc. And during that, I'd surfed against Australia. And, you know, a good friend of mine became, or as he became, Brian Jenkins, was the head judge for Australia from Palm Beach. And those days, no phone, no internet, no nothing. So we were handwriting to each other. He says, come out, you know, I'll put you up and rah, rah, rah. And so the two things really went together, warm climate and surfing. So I went, well, I'll go to Palm Beach. As it turned out, their diagnosis was off. But because I didn't become crippled, however, I did have a serious arthritic condition. But it was one that, through training really hard, I managed. So,
how different were the sporting cultures from back home in Cornwall to Australia when you arrived?
I'm going to tell you two stories. I know that they might go on for a short while, but two stories. So I arrived in the country and I bumped into Neil Purchase Senior. Okay, and lovely man, amazing shaper, one of the best in the world, and we hit it off. We just became friends, and I'd only been in Australia a few weeks, and I'm standing at Snapper Rocks watching, and with Neil, and I watched Dominic Wybrow take off behind the rock at Snapper, and do this big figure of 8 roundhouse cutback, whacking the lip and going on, and my brain said, "Oh, that's a cutback." Seriously, I thought I was doing cutbacks, right? And I could do laybacks. I actually could do some quite good laybacks, but it was like, ooh, I've got some work to do, which is great, you know. And then the other funny thing is, so there's naivety there, basically, because you know you think you're good in a country, you represent the country, and sometimes it goes to your head, I think, and you don't travel because you've got no money, so you don't really see what's out there. But shortly after getting here and staying with Brian and stuff like that, I ended up moving out to Broadbeach, but I bought a car. I bought an old Ford Escort, and it was so rusty that the seats used to move around as I was driving down the road, right? It was very cheap. And on the journey, quite often, I'd go from Broadbeach to Snapper or Duramba or whatever. Wherever I thought there was waves, I mean, I was so hungry, I'd just go every day. And I spotted this guy by the side of the road with a surfboard, and he's hitching. So I picked him up, and he didn't say much, and he just said, "Oh, and I'm terrible with names." So he told me his name, first name, in one ear, out the other. Anyway, I kept going down the coast, and I kept seeing him, and so I'd pick him up every day. And this went on for about 3 months. Whenever I went down, he was there.
Can I have a guess who it may be?
You can guess.
Would it be MP?
It was MP, right? It was MP. And I had no idea, right? It was just
Really?
complete naivety, right? I had literally no idea. And he used to come up at me a Snapper, even if I didn't, you know, and he'd shake my hand and said, "Oh, man with a little red car." That's what because he couldn't remember my name, but I had the Ford Escort. It was a red Ford Escort, right? And then I had no idea who it was. And then one day, and we used to go down there, I said, "Where are you surfing?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to surf Snapper." I said, "Oh, I'm going to surf Duramba." So I'd drop him at Snapper and go to Duramba, or vice versa, you know. And then one day I said, "Oh, I'm going to surf Snapper." And I said, "Oh, I'll paddle out with you." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, okay." Anyway, we paddled out together, and I went, "Oh, God, paddles all right." You know, I was fit, but it's like, well, this guy's pretty fit. And he paddled straight out behind the back of the rock, turned round in the middle of what was a small crowd then, and just took off on this big backwash that is quite often there, and goes by me completely way back in the tube. And I'm going, "He surfs all right." And I said to the guy next to me, I said, "He surfs all right." And he goes, "Yeah." "Oh, yeah." And I said, "Who is it?" Pick him up for 3 months, right?
Yeah.
And they said, "Michael Peterson." I went, "Oh." So there's 2 bits of naivety. That's where I was. I was in the shade.
Yeah, fair enough. But being on the Goldie, involved with the surfing community, you got heavily involved as surfing as a coach at that time, would you say, or a judge and competitor?
My life's been organic.
Yeah.
It's not always been the best. Like everybody has ups and downs, right? But I've always seemed to, or something's found me, and I've got out of wherever I was that was maybe not going the right way, whatever it might be. And so Neil got me in, rings me up, or I probably didn't even ring me up. I don't think I had a landline. So he probably spoke to me and he said, "Oh, he said, you used to judge a lot when you were in Cornwall." I said, "Yeah, I used to run comps and stuff like that." And he said, "Well, they're running the first Billabong Pro at Durango." And he said, "I've put your name forward as an unbiased judge," which I would have been because I didn't really know anybody, you know. And this was 3 months, no more than 3 months after I'd arrived in the country. So I went, yeah, and they accepted me. So I ended up judging the Billabong Pro, which was at Durango. It was actually where Oki did the first air ever on camera. And when I was getting towards the end of the comp, a young lad walks up to me and he says, "I've been through all the judging sheets," and he said, "You're one of the most consistent judges here." I went, "Oh, okay, thanks." I thought he was paying me a compliment, and it was nice to hear. And I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Well, are you judging the junior final?" And I said, "Well, no, actually, I'm scheduled to judge, you know, other things, but I'm not going to judge the junior final. I'm not on that, you know, not on the panel." He said, "Oh." He said, "Well, do you mind getting a pen and a bit of paper?" And he said, "Coming down the beach and scoring the heat for me." And I went, "No, I'll do that." And I knew why he was asking, right? He was a 16-year-old kid, didn't have a clue who he was. And I knew why he was asking because it was a Billabong comp. Obviously, Gordon Merchant was in Billabong, a lot of sponsorship in Billabong. And the junior that he was up against was from Burleigh, right? And I went, okay, he's just being very cluey. He's quite intelligent for a 16-year-old anyway.
To see if there's any push through possibly.
Sometimes that happens, and we've all seen it, unfortunately. And that's where you would have seen me also go off at people in the past, because I just went, "You can't say that, you can't do that," you know. And that's another story I should possibly tell, and Sean's aware that I might tell it, I think, anyway, but I'll tell
so
it.
the grommet, the 16-year-old,
the 16-year-old,
down the beach with your pen and paper.
Yeah, put me back on track.
Right.
And anyway, I judged the final, and he came out of the water, and all his mates are coming down, and he came to me because I was further across, better vantage position. And he said, "How'd I go?" And I said, "You won." And he goes, "Are you sure?" I said, "No, you won." He said, "Are you sure?" Like this. And I said, "You won." And I said, "Before you say any more, I know why you're asking, right?" I said, you know, and he looked at me and I said, "But you won." And I said, "The thing is, you won by that much that you can't not win, right?" And he said, "Oh." And I said, "So, but what might happen at the presentation is they might say it was very close, right?" And I said, "But you'll win." And he said, "Are you coming to the presentation?" I said, "Yeah." Anyway, I sat with him. It was Merrick Davis. Right, and Marek was sponsored by Nev, and I'd already met Nev, so I sat at the table and I could have written the script for what was said. You know, it did say, "Oh, very close junior final, but the winner is Merrick Davis." And Marek said to me, "I need help with my surfing," and he said, "Would you help me?" And I went, "Sure." I said, "Well, from a judge's perspective," he said, "Well, no, just you know," and I said, "Sure." Anyway, that's how I became a coach.
All right.
It was as simple as that, and then. I think it was 84. I've talked to Rabbit about this because Rabbit and I get on well. And I think we did one of the first ever judging courses in Australia, for Surfing Australia. Alan Atkins ran it. And there's more stories, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. But anyway, I did it, I passed it. And
we like stories though, Clive.
Well, I teach by stories when I'm still teaching first aid and stuff and bits and pieces. But anyway, I got through the course with Rabbit, which was great, and became an official Surfing Australia coach. You know, and that I continued doing alongside the coaching. But then the training thing, if you want to, when you get to that, I'll tell you that came a little bit differently.
Yeah, well, just morph into the
Well,
training.
I started coaching Merrick, and then I started coaching a few other people because people were approaching me. And I don't know if there were any other individuals coaches at that time, to be honest. Albie Ross once sent me a message and said, "People don't understand how instrumental you were to coaching because you were one of the only coaches, you know." And so I started training people then as well. I started using my gym knowledge, which was getting bigger and greater.
And what was that a benefit for? For them to, their own personal health, strength?
No, these were all surfers.
Yeah,
Neil Purchase Jr., Craig Pitchers, I think, was in there at one point, and I did a little bit of coaching with Craig from memory. It's a long time ago, but Craig's a great guy. Obviously, owns part of JS now. So there were quite a few people, and I think there was about a group of 5 generally. And in the top of the Pizza Hut at Kira, there was a little surf life saving gym that they built up there. So I got permission to use that, and twice a week I used to train the guys and stuff like that.
Just like strength and conditioning?
Yeah, wasn't even aware of that term at the time, but it was just me teaching what I thought was applicable to surfing. I think having done it, started training at 17, and I'm now, when I started that, I was probably 27 or 28. So I was 10 years down the track, and I never stopped training. I think I started to learn what was good and what wasn't. Why am I doing this? Well, making no difference. It hurts, but I might get a bigger bicep, but it might not be what's good in the water. So I started, just trial and error. And I then started to pass that on. Became Kira club coach at one point. And the training thing
Didn't you win a comp there?
I won the senior men's one year. Yeah, the old guys though. So with Scammell and a few
I
other
thought there was
people.
another competition you'd won. No, was it?
I won. I was third in the Sydney Masters at one point.
Right. Yeah.
I won some stuff in England and stuff, but So I don't. If I did, I don't remember. I surfed in Power Bender a lot, actually. I used to come up and surf in Power Bender a lot.
Yeah.
And I caught up with Bushy the other day, which was fantastic. I'd seen him in ages. So.
Yeah, so he's living back here now, is he?
Yeah, he's in Eleanor on the Goldie.
Right, out of France. He was there for a while.
Yeah. You should catch up with him.
I will, yeah.
He's I think he talks more than I do, which is pretty hard. So.
Oh, jeez, I talk a lot. Don't give me a beer. Whiskey's
I don't really
worse.
drink these days, so.
So how did you tailor the coaching or the training to behind the athlete? Each individual was different? Or?
I was working for the Gold Coast Council on the Gold Coast, and I felt like the Gold Coast was in a transformation phase, I think, because this is 82 to 90 I lived on the Goldie, and what was happening socially, what was happening, great music, saw In Excess at Palm Beach and all that sort of stuff, but what was happening socially was there was a bit of a divide. There was a them and us. It was like the people that were kind of slightly lower socioeconomic, if you're allowed to say that these days. And there was this hierarchy that had all the money on the Gold Coast, I think. And there was no real middle divide. And I was probably in the middle in my thinking, if that makes sense. And so the job with the council was mind-numbing. I got it on the backs of having chemistry background and mining, but it was a terrible job. And so I just decided I had to leave the Gold Coast, and I went down to Sydney and visited a couple of gyms and got offered 2 jobs immediately. And so I left and went to and that's where the training really started.
So is this where you helped create that state-of-the-art facility in Harbour? Or
yeah, so I
evolved to that? Yeah.
There was a RSL on the headland at Harbord, RSL club that had a gym, and called the Harbord Diggers Club and the Harbord Diggers Gym, right? So it was between Freshwater and Curly. And I also worked in another one called Boomers, which was in the middle of Manly. And Boomers was a natural, and he was natural, but natural bodybuilder. He had totally different ideas than the other set, shall we say. But 65 hours a week I was working, and so when I went to the Diggers, I worked there for a while, 6 months. They decided, the assistant manager left, who was the operations manager, became my title eventually. But it came down to myself and one other guy who had an academic background in sports science or whatever. I didn't have anything like that. I'd just crawled up through the ranks, And so I didn't get the job. And then I was looking for a job, and I ended up managing 2 Aloha shops for a while. And then they rang me up and said the other guy didn't work out, and did I want the job back in the gym? And that's when I also started to meet people from the ASCA, a guy called Peter Harding, who surfed. I met him at Longreef. And then from there, I joined the ASCA and started to really learn about Eastern Bloc techniques of training and stuff like that.
And for some of our listeners or viewers, ASCA is the Australian Strength Conditioning Association.
Yep.
I've known quite a few guys out of that.
Yep.
on the coast.
Dan.
Dan,
Dan,
yeah,
yeah.
there's one. Kerry's in there
Yep,
as well.
Kerry,
yeah.
who I've worked for up here for quite a while.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah. And is that gym as well, or is it like... When, I remember you had something a little bit with Shane Herring at some point back in the day.
Poor old Shane.
Yeah.
Shane had gone well off the path of health, and he came to me, and I'm such an amazing surfer, but he'd been led the wrong way into substances and stuff. And he approached me and said, "Would you coach me?" And I said, "I will, but you've got to clean your act up." And he couldn't do it, so I didn't end up coaching him. It was just so sad. And I knew that even if I might have been more of a positive influence around him, he wasn't going to go anywhere if he couldn't get out of the place he was in. So, but the gym was great. They had a lot of money, so they gave me an open checkbook, and I created 90% of what happened in the building, which became one of the best gyms in the country at one point. And then I started an athlete sponsorship program for all the talented athletes in the area. I talked the club into giving everybody free memberships and stuff like that, which brought Lane in, who I'd known from the Aloha days and before that, just from coaching Merrick when I used to sort of come from the Gold Coast down, et cetera, et cetera. But it also brought in Leanne Fenwick, the Olympic volleyballer who ended up training, and it had Kerry Pothurst. Was it Kerry Pothurst? No, it was the netballers that were in there as well, and these guys were gold medalists, and so they got free training, but it just brought people into the gym. It's like they're training there, we'll train there. So there was a business ploy to it, but everybody won.
Right. So, what's one thing the fitness industry now is probably still getting wrong with what you've seen over the years from the Harvard days? You think?
Well, this is only my humble opinion, of course, okay? But where it goes wrong with taking fitness and then taking an athlete, okay? And we're talking about surfing. So and surfing is just one of the sports, obviously, that people train for. But what people do is, if they're not cluey, what they do is they train the person to surf, okay? So if you've got a beginner who's never surfed, you train him to surf. And you're going to give him weight training or whatever to be able to surf. But when he gets to the top tier, you're not training him to surf. He's one of the best there is on the planet. You're not training him to surf. You're training him to win. So what you would do, and I've said this, I've lectured on this about training surfers, actually in more than one country. And I said, I would not be scared to take a professional surfer and give him one exercise and say, that's your training. And people go, that's ridiculous. I said, that's not ridiculous, because if that's all he needs, that's what I would give him. So you have to give him training that is effective. No two people are the same. But this business of giving them paddle training, and how many Ks do they paddle a week?
Yeah, a lot.
A lot, right? So if you're giving them lots of shoulder work, I give them integrity shoulder work, so keeping the shoulders where they should be, so that you can move and glide and the shoulder doesn't get injured. That's what you train them for. Like Landon Smiles, who I was training for a while. I mean, he's very small, in his build, fantastic little surfer, and well, not so little, he's taller than me, but fantastic surfer. But people used to come up to me even when I was doing that, say, "Oh, you need to put more bulk on Landon." I go, "How can I? He's not built that way."
Yeah.
What I need to do is strengthen his joints. So I was at one point I was really concentrating on the knee injury thing, and unfortunately, he ended up parting ways with me, and he ended up injuring his knee anyway. Nobody's fault particularly, but that's what I was trying to allay, and that's what you've got to do. You've got to look at what do they need, because if you've got a guy like, say, Shane Horan, right, for the sake of argument, he was a bridesmaid to Mark Richards for like several years, 4 years, I think, and nothing wrong with Shane surfing, and he chose a different path and a different style of surfing. But if he took it, and Shane was as fit as a fiddle, probably fitter than MR, even though MR was surfing fit, But if you could have picked something that Shane could have done, one thing to make him that little bit better on a turn, I mean, one of the things I said to Merrick, and this is the talent he had, it was unbelievable. I was coaching him at Kira one day, and I brought him in, and I said, I want you to hit the lip 4 inches higher. And I went 4 inches. He goes, what do you mean? I said, Go and do exactly what you're doing, and the top turns that you're hitting, I want you to hit it 4 inches higher. Come back in after 2 or 3 waves and tell me what you think. And he goes, well, I said, Merritt, just go and do it, right? I said, you'll get it, trust me. The whole thing I was doing was, he had great top turns. It wasn't his top turn, it was the amount of spray that I wanted.
Right.
So by hitting the lip that much more, slightly nearer the thinner part of the water, I mean, obviously...
Displace more the water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he was putting up big fans, and he goes, I can't believe the spray I'm putting up. Because he was so talented, he understood 4 inches, if that makes sense, you know? So you've got to have an athlete that understands that.
It's funny you say that too, because when you watch like the WSL and the commentary now, and when they, oh wow, did you see the spray coming off of that, you know? Obviously the power, but that water displacement into that.
I mean, Oki had the head flick.
Yeah.
He could turn and flick his hair, and his turn would look better, right?
So you obviously went through the program of the ASCA,
Yep.
and you got accredited and
Twice, actually, because the ISA folded for a while. There was all sorts of stuff going on behind the scenes, and it folded, so it didn't exist for a while. Dan actually resurrected. As far as I know, it was Dan's, all Dan's doing, and it was great. I wasn't part of it for a while. When I went, and I ended up teaching the personal training courses and stuff like that, because there was money in personal training, so I did that. But the ASCA thing, I had to do it again. They gave me my 1 as a credit, but I had to redo my 2. And then over the years, I've now become what's like a 2.5, which is a mentor coach. So if people are doing their course, they can come to me and I talk with them and stuff like that. And I think they need changing. I'll give them some pointers, and I can actually then sign them off.
Sign them off, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And wow, so you've worked with many athletes and also musicians. It's not
Also
just
musicians.
all kinds of times.
No.
Do you want to drop any names or?
Well, I mean, the obvious one that most people know about is Ian Moss is a great friend of mine.
Right.
And the beauty about that is he came into the gym one night, and this is the Sydney gym. He came into the gym one night, and I was doing stuff, and he came in really late. We shut at 10:30. He came in at 9:30. And the receptionist, God bless her, Becky, said to me, oh, Clive, you're not going to know who just walked in. I said, who walked? And I'm just, who walked in? And she said, Ian Moss. And I said, who's Ian Moss? Honest. Because, I mean, my musical background was English, right?
Yeah.
And so Ian came in, and all he was doing was swimming initially. And I went down and basically had to throw him out the pool every night because he was always hanging behind trying to have another lap, you know.
Oh, really? That dedicated?
Oh, yeah. He's
wow.
a great swimmer. He's great. Genetics, great genetics. His flexibility was great, stuff like that. Anyway, we ended up chatting. We ended up being friends. And then he said to me, I want to do some weights. And he said, would you help me? And I said, sure, but I can't charge you. He said, but I'll pay you. And I said, you can't. And he said, why? I said, because principle. I said, I don't even let a personal trainer into this gym because I don't think there are that many good ones out there. Right? So I said, I can't personally train you in this gym if I'm not even letting the others in. I said, it's ethically not correct. He said, well, how? I said, well, look, by that stage, we started to understand that I was really into music. I didn't play anything at that point, but I was really into guitar players, ironically. So I used to bring CDs in of American guitar players he'd never heard or whatever, or British guitar players. And so we had that sort of, oh, I like that guy sort of thing going on. You know, it was great. And then,
Did you know who he was by then?
Not really at first, even then. We went through that sort of process, and then when he said weight train me, then obviously I had a closer contact. And then so that's how really it started to know how good he was, because he said, well, what can I, he said, well, I said, if you've got something on, I said, just invite me. I'll be, you know, like, just don't make me pay on the door sort of thing, you know. So he said, all right, I've got a gig on next week down at, it was the 3 Weeds in Rozelle. And I went and I stood there and I went, me. I said, oh, this guy's bloody good, you know. And I had no idea. And I went, mate, I'm not peeing in your pocket, but you're good. He goes, oh, thank you. He's so humble. He's very quiet.
Was that as in the band? As the
It was a Mossy. It was one of my, it was 19. Well, this is 1991. So it was just Ian Moss then. Tucker's Daughter had, you know, that album had gone. Yeah. The second one didn't really do much. So it was at that stage. He brought me in the second one. and gave it to me. And then he said, oh, and I've got another gig coming up. Do you want to go? And I said, oh, where is it? You know, he said, oh, the entertainment centre. And I said, oh yeah, okay, thank you. And so he said, I'll bring you in a couple. So he brought me in 2 tickets, and it was Rod Stewart. He's supporting Rod Stewart, right? That's how it started. So all my payment, I'm getting VIP meet and greet, Deep Purple, and all that stuff in the end, which really floated my boat. It was much better than money for me. And we still. He just played at my party. I think you know that.
Yeah.
And so.
I'm sorry again, I missed it.
No, it's fine. I wish you were there.
Yeah, I know. I was kicking myself. I couldn't get out.
Yeah.
Work though, commitments. You know?
Yeah, it was good. It was fun, you know. And obviously I backed him up. Now I can play and stuff like that. But it was great. It was just, and he was just once again so humble, you know.
So that from that music, you said you didn't play anything. It was just your love, and you love guitars. So what instrument do you play?
Well, I'm a drummer now, and Ian started me playing. He gave me the keys to his studio because he knew I kind of liked music, and we used to go and watch things together, let alone just his stuff, you know. And he just said, look, here's the keys to my studio. Buy yourself a drum kit, put it in my studio if you want to have a go. That's where I started. So.
You taught self-taught drumming?
Predominantly self-taught. I had some great Dan Putelli, a Swiss drummer friend of mine who wanted to learn to surf. Did a swap.
Okay.
Gave him some
same
surfing
thing
lessons.
again.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, well, it's better that way.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And so, you know, he gave me some great pointers. He toured with Bon Jovi, not in there, but as a second band. You know, so that was 40,000 crowds and stuff. So he knew his stuff. And then it just got slowly better, you know.
Well, we'll throw some snippets in later. After this, we'll get down there and we'll see if you can actually play those things.
See if the drum kit sparkles. Yeah, or if I sparkle behind the drum kit.
All right, we're getting to the fast five. We've got a fast 5 questions. So,
okay.
Best coach you ever learned from?
Oh wow, Ashley Jones in the strength and conditioning field. Surfing was, I never really had people that I followed, but later Austin Ware I did some time with in Sydney, and he's a great coach. So.
What athlete taught you the most?
The 2 people that taught me to surf, Mick Jackman and Jack Liggett, I think, because they were the ones that also used to slap me around the ear if I did something wrong, you know. So probably those 2 realistically. Alain Pascoe when I cycled in Cornwall. Probably that's because the early days I think are the most important.
Yeah, bit of foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah. One training principle everyone should follow.
Great technique.
Okay.
Great technique in knowing where the center of gravity is, because I see a lot of exercise. Squatting is probably one of the best exercises ever, but I see a lot of people that just don't understand how to do it correctly.
All right. What's something people still get wrong about surfing performance?
The number of turns. One effective turn is better than 6 wiggles.
Of course, yes. Critical manoeuvre and the most critical
That's right.
part of the way, right? That's how they judge it.
Well, I started judging again, but that didn't really work out. I didn't like the head judge thing going on and stuff. And I was not too good with the computer because I've got a reading disorder. And so to do it on paper is one thing, but to transcribe it then to the screen, I can't actually see the boxes properly.
Yeah. Would you have visioned back when you started like judging and you're hanging and surfing with MP and Rabbit and all them, Neil Purchase Jr. Would you, obviously you said you saw Oggy do his first air at D-Bar. Would you have thought now that it evolved right now to 2026 and years earlier from like Martin Potter sort of really took that evolution to the air,
Sure.
or what they're doing now, do you feel that it's really a good part of the repertoire in the waves, or only needed for that kind of wave that it's not a pipeline or where you're gonna, it's pretty.
Well, didn't Mick lose his title at Pipeline from somebody doing an air? Didn't that happen? Somebody did.
Who was that?
Didn't Mick lose his title at Pipe from somebody doing an air?
I'm not sure.
Something like that happened.
Yeah.
Look, I think airs are tricks. Okay, I really do, but they're very clever and very difficult tricks. Okay, so do they need rewarding for that? I think they do. However, I'm old school, you know, so the whole Richard Cram thing is still in my brain. Cram used to be a friend of mine.
Yeah.
You know, and I
Best
say used to
round
haven't
out
seen him much, you know.
cut back. What do you think? The cram, what do they call it? He had a spider on his board, didn't he?
It was a redback.
Redback, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Best cutbacks.
I met Crammy in England because I was sponsored by a company called Tiki who were fantastic with me. I had an Australian shaper called John Hall from Brookvale, and they said you can have as many freeboards as you want. And they said, we want you to experiment. So I did. I experimented a lot with John Hall. We just came up with all sorts of stuff. And then, you know, that was big for me as well. But I don't know. I'm losing my thread here. Go on. You better pull me back online.
Okay, so what would success mean to you today as a general and a whole, evolved in whatever you're doing now?
I'm philosophical about that. Happiness. Success means happiness, nothing else. I think if you know, the old adage that's find a job that you like and you'll never work a day in your life, that sort of stuff. Yeah. I believe in that. Yeah. You know, you're probably in that space pretty much.
Sure.
The hours sound a bit long, but you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I if you can be in it, and I've worked on the road as road manager. Anything that's I like doing and I love, if I'm working in it, I do a good job. But it's like I just love it.
Final question.
Yeah.
After everything you've seen and experienced, from British cycling tracks to world champion surfing stages, what's the biggest life lesson you've learnt?
Wow.
Didn't
know that was coming. I think there are no rules. There are no rules. People go, what do you mean? There are guidelines, right? One of the things I used to put up in my lectures was rules. And they go, I was one of them, but I wasn't. Rules are for the guidance of wise men, women, you know, and the adherence of fools. Because if you follow something like this, you're never going to go there. And I think that's the big thing, is just, you know, and that's with everything. That's probably one other thing.
Yeah. Well, Clive lives here on the sunny coast, and if those who just want a personal trainer or, you know, maybe some mentoring in some kind of way, he does have a website where you can contact him at cliverodell.com. We'll slip that there in the comments on the podcast, so you can contact him there. Other than that, you might catch him around the traps of the Wombai pub playing in his local
Alfresco.
band.
I've been playing at Alfresco's a bit. A few pubs. Yeah. I've been doing a few gigs here.
Might even get you down in his sound room. We're going to head down there quite shortly, and going to see if he can make some sparkle on the drum kit. And we'll see. Yeah, just throw in a few. What do they call them? They're not riffs. What do they call them? They're
just grooves. Probably is the best word. Yeah, just drum grooves and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's like I'm trying to think of the name. You have that. There's a you know, your riff, and then there's like a drum. Anyway.
Fills,
maybe.
Fills,
yeah,
kit,
little
maybe.
fills, things like that. Yeah. Okay.
I think the biggest thing is, like, if ever anybody does want some help with something, and you know, I think I can help them if they ask me, then you don't have to pay for the humour. Just remember that. So.
Okay, Clive, pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And again, viewers, listeners, thanks for joining us on the Week in Waves.
Thank you.
And until next time,
Most of it was true. Shoes. I was just saying, did I tell you about MP, or did you guess?
No, I just guessed.
Yeah, I know.
Because he'd sound like he'd be the one without the car and hitchhiking. Yeah, that's crazy.
And I was just so naive.
Yeah.
Probably still am. Let me put my red shoes on.
He's got his red boots on.
The thing with the feet on pedals is it's the footwear. If you've got too much grip, they bind on the pedals.
Right.
So you can't do what you need to do.
Okay, there's a lesson. Get your old sneakers.
Get your shoes sorted out, mate.
Yeah, so here we go. He's going to play some drumming.
Oh, look, there's even a Bonham magazine there. Look.
Yeah, I know. His son did a...
Jason?
Yeah, they just did a Led Zeppelin...
I've seen Jason once.
Yeah. They were in Brisbane like a month ago or so. Yeah,
I know.
That would have been nuts to see.
It's just the whole travelling and cost of staying overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't have a beer really because you got to drive home. If
Oh,
you
well, I
don't,
can't drive home.
Yeah.
It's too dangerous
Yeah.
for me these days to drive home at like 1 a.m. or something, you know.
Alrightio.
When you go to bed early, you know.
Yes. So we're getting on the drum kit.
This bass drum will knock you out the ceiling. Do you want to shut that door? So we don't have all the neighbours complaining. My neighbours are actually pretty good though. So.
Yeah. Oh.
You want me to play something else or something?
Yeah, mate. Go for it.